SAFM.
5 minutes after 2. Well, welcome to Life Happens, and this congratulations are in order.
Thank you so much.
You are now the incoming Chancellor of Stellenbosch. I mean, when that happens, I wonder what happens to you, because in the time when we have the kind of activity that we have in the country, specifically in institutions of higher learning, I wonder whether it is a sense of, you know, it's a great honor to be asked, but do you get nervous? Do you think, what do you think when you take up this kind of position, when you accept it?
It's very early in the interview to be asking such difficult questions, but you're quite right. It is with a sense of trepidation, because every single university campus, for varying reasons, is a site of contest, and Stellenbosch too. So I approach it with a sense of humility and a sense of duty, but also with a sense of joy, because Stellenbosch is a national treasure. The whole university has got resources which are important to our country. The university is committed to being more inclusive, which excites me and heartens me. So it's with a sense of joy that I approach my duties.
What are you going to bring to the university?
You know, Pamela, it's a good question, because when I was approached, I said that the Vice-Chancellor is a white male, and I'm a white male. And then people said, but there are other things that you can bring that would not make it just a rubber stamp of white male hierarchy at Stellenbosch. And I hope I'll bring a constitutional sense of our country's values. I hope I'll bring, I'm involved with children's homes and young people's projects. I hope I'll bring a sense of the importance of the next generation. You know, I'm 66, and it's the people at high school and university who are going to be leading our country in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And of course, as a gay man, a proudly gay man, I bring some sense of the struggle for LGBTI equality. As someone living with HIV in a country with 7.5 million people living with HIV, in a disease that is still too silent. And I try to speak out about that. And of course, next month it will be 22 years since I started antiretrovirals. And we still have more work to do. We've got 3.6 million people on ARVs, and that's a great achievement for our country, but it's not enough. Like with everything else in our country, we've got no room to pat ourselves on the back. So I hope I'll be able to bring some of those things, and a sense, of course, Pamela, if I can say one last thing.
Listen, we've got an hour.
Okay, but I don't want to, judges and lawyers talk too much, so you better interrupt me.
No, go ahead.
The last thing I want to say, Pamela, is really that our university sector, our tertiary sector, is a very precious national resource. Whether it's the historically black universities or the historically white universities, we've got a research output. We've got a level of training and scholarliness and learning and discipline amongst our students, which is not matched anywhere else in Africa. I don't wish to do down the universities like Makerere in Uganda, a couple of universities elsewhere, but our tertiary capacity is, I think one can say, unmatched in Africa. And we must nurture that, and we must cherish it and work carefully with it.
All right, I'm in conversation with Justice Edwin Cameron. He's going to be with me until 3 o'clock, and I will be taking those calls on 0891 104 207. He said I must stop him. No, we're not going to stop him from talking. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with more after this.
On SAFM.
11 minutes after 2 o'clock, I'm in conversation with Justice Edwin Cameron, who's just stepped down. Are you less busy now, or more busy than you were sitting in the
More busy.
Who would have thought, eh? Who would have
Indeed.
thought? Or did you expect the kind of interest there is in your contribution to this nation?
Well, it's kind of you to put it that way, Pamela, but yes, I think there's so much for us to do as South Africans, and we've got so much to work on and so much positive in our country. So yes, I thought that I'd be occupied, but I have been quite busy.
You have recently, I mean, it didn't take very long. You say something and then there was a lot of contestation. Recently, when you were honoured, you said something about us not following the word, I'm not going to be quoting you verbatim, but following the letter of the law to our peril. This was in relation to a case that many may know or may not know. I don't want to get into the merits of the case, but I do want you to talk to the principles of what it is you were trying to address. Because on, you know, what happens when a nation is in a crisis is that we are desperate to find the target. And as we shoot for the target, we may be missing out on how that could cause many more casualties.
You've summed up my whole argument.
Okay.
You don't need my lawyerly insights. Pamela, let me say this. I was at WITS, at a symposium that WITS Law School hosted in my honour, and I was asked to make closing remarks, and I identified 3 big threats to constitutionalism. Not the questioning of constitution, how effective has it been, was the Mandela Constitution a sellout, what have we achieved? All of those questions are good, because they sharpen us and they make us determined to be better and to deliver better, which all of us should be committed to. The questions that I raised were, one, a radical rejection of constitutionalism altogether. And that's a legitimate point of view. We've got other examples. You know, we've got the South Sudan, where the president and the deputy president went to war with each other. We've got Rwanda, where President Paul Kagame gets 98% of the vote. Well, that's an admirable percentage of the vote, and people say there are no plastic bags on the streets of Kigali. We've got examples on our continent and in Eastern Europe and elsewhere where we reject our kind of constitutionalism. And the second one I identified was criminal syndicalism, where criminal syndicates, and we heard Mr. Vusi Pikoli on that in relation to SAA, they enter the state with a deliberate entrenched idea of looting and stripping and self-enriching. And the third one that I identified was a radical rejection of process. And the point I made, and thank you for letting me make it, even though I'm, as we say in Afrikaans, ganning aan.
No, please
like a
do,
lawyer.
because I mean, I don't think, you know, you made the point, people reacted, I don't think you've been given a chance to respond.
Let me make the point, thanks Pamela, that we fought under apartheid for process. When Nelson Mandela and 156 of our national leaders were acquitted in 1959 at the first treason trial, the first thing the apartheid government did was to change the laws to make it more easy for Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu and their co-trialists to be convicted. They were charged not with treason,
Yes.
they were charged with sabotage. Now, I fought a trial with my later my colleague Justice Ian Farlin before Justice Laurie Ackerman in the 1980s. He resigned in 1987 because he couldn't reconcile his conscience with enforcing apartheid as a judge. But we argued it was state versus Leapile, and if Mr. Leapile is listening, I'd love to meet him again. He was an ANC guerrilla, an ANC fighter, and we fought for process. The state said, we don't want this witness's name disclosed. We fought, and Justice Ackerman said, name. The state said, we don't want this witness's face exposed. Justice Ackerman said, face exposed. We fought 6 or 7 fights, and we fought for the process of fairness for the reason you gave. Now, in the Me Too debate, and the particular issue that I raised was the equal education debate, I think that we lost sight of the profound values of fundamental fairness, which is not to say that you shouldn't, as you say, find your target and expose perpetrators and make perpetrators, call them to account and find justice for survivors and victims. But I think that when you radically reject process, you are rejecting rationality and fundamental fairness in a way that is dangerous for us here.
And to that point, I want to also give you an opportunity to then address a nation that is in so much pain, that is desperate to get response, to get accountability going, where you know there isn't much of coming. So it's easy to find that person and then throw all our energies at that target. What do you then say to a nation this desperate that is screaming for everybody, or at least somebody, to pay attention?
Well, the first thing I say is I shut up and I listen. I'm humble. You know how many murders we've got every day? 21,000 plus murders is 57 every day. And Pimela, 2 of those murders, 789 murders in the last statistical year, are what we call vigilante murders. It's where, as you say, our people, and now our mothers and sisters and brothers and parents, are so angry with the justice system, so angry with me as a judge and the prosecutors and the police, that they burn people and stone them in their own communities. 2 a day. That's a lot of vigilante murders. So the first thing you do is to shut up and you listen and understand the extent of the problem. The second thing I'd say is that we've got the processes of accountability going. My goodness, I look at my colleague, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. He has a career and a stature intellectually as a lawyer. In terms of process, he has a deep understanding. If you know his life story, how he was sponsored by an Indian shopkeeper.
Yes, a gentleman who said, let me give you a voucher for your family to be fed while you go to school. He was about to give up on his education. And he said, okay, well, let your family come in here once a month to get groceries and then pay me afterwards. After school, he went back and the gentleman said, no, just pay it forward.
What a wonderful story, Pimela. And Justice Zondo is presiding over a can of worms. This is almost like the TRC. And he will decide the evidence in the end, and so I won't anticipate what he's deciding, but he's a person of irreproachable integrity and competence. So we're getting there. We've got Ms. Shamila Batoy, who's now the NDPP, and she again is a person of irreproachable integrity and competence. So I would say that we're getting things right slowly, not quickly enough. And if people say you're a slow-moving lawyer, I'll say, kick our butts.
We'll take your calls and your reaction to this conversation. I am in conversation with Judge Cameron and Edwin Cameron, and he's with me until 3 o'clock. And I did ask you to call us with all the questions that you have for him, 0891 104 207.
At SFM Radio and at Pimela Mutile on Twitter.
It is 21 minutes after 2 o'clock. You're on SAFM, and I'm in conversation with Justice Edwin Cameron, who's just stepped down from the Constitutional Court. You mentioned earlier on, Justice, there was a time when we were desperate for, HIV to be dealt with in the manner that is appropriate. And the country was at a low at that time, wasn't it? And I get the sense that we are at a low at the moment. In your view, what needs to happen? I think one of the things that I think South Africans are waiting to hear is a sense of, if nothing else, just hearing people take accountability. If we can start there, you are in close proximity with some of these leaders. Why do you think that's not coming through?
Can I just say this, Mela, that judges aren't actually in close proximity.
I know you shouldn't be, but I think you have tea together, don't you guys?
No, in fact, it's not true. The last time I saw President Cyril Ramaphosa was at the Durban AIDS conference in 2016. He was walking past with his bodyguards. That's the closest I got to him. So, in fact, it's not true, and there's a virtue to it that we are separate. That's why it's 3 arms of government.
Yes.
But let me get to the real point you're raising. Yeah. With AIDS, we were reaching several 100,000 deaths per year in the late 1990s. We had a prevalence amongst our pregnant women at public health clinics of 20 to 30, closer to 30%. And we didn't have the infrastructural capacity or the budget even to think of antiretrovirals. Look at us now. 10 years later, 20 years later, we've got 3.6 million people on ARVs. We still haven't got where we need to be, but we've achieved a significant amount. Now, what made the difference? The first thing was angry citizen action. Zaki Ahmad Treatment Action Campaign. They took on the drug companies, they forced them to lower prices, they took on President Mbeki, a powerful, forbidding man with a lot of power. And they said, President Mbeki, you and Minister Chabalala Msimang are wrong on this. Our people need these drugs. And then they exercised their rights of movement, of protest, of free speech, and then they would exercise the ultimate right, which is the right of access to courts in the Bill of Rights. And the court, Chief Justice Arthur Chaskos and Deputy Chief Justice Pius Nkonzo Langa, unanimously upheld their charge. And the court ordered the government to start making ALVs available. So that's our template. Accountability, but it needs you and me, us as ordinary citizens, not to say accountability and action lie there. It starts with us.
It does. And when you look at leadership, you spoke of the president now. Okay, so we'll stick with the president. In fact, when he speaks, he says, he raises the fact that, things must change, and he apologizes a lot. He's been doing that for a while on behalf of government, so we get that. What I do think needs to happen, though, is action, right? And so when we look at, you spoke of the long arm of the law and the wheel turning so slowly, there are things that can happen to speed that up, right? The bench, let's talk about what you know. The bench now needs more judges. That appointment is not coming through. It would go a long way in getting us speeding up what needs to be done. That's the one example. I'm not going to now sit here with a long list. But I'm asking, what's the problem? What's taking so long, and why is this not seen in the serious light in which it should be seen?
Well, I think it is seen in the serious light. I think that what we need to do has started to happen, Pamela. And I'm not here to give a rosy account of government's interventions, but let us take crime intelligence, which for 9 years, I think the evidence suggests, I haven't seen all the evidence, I can't make authoritative pronouncements, but in my reasonably formed view, for 9 years crime intelligence was completely disabled. You need crime intelligence to find out where the manhole covers are going. Who are the scrap dealers, either in Rosettenville or in Soweto or in Ilanga or Guguletu, who are taking that scrap? Not difficult. You need a system of informants. You need to be paying the people, not going on holidays overseas yourself with the money. So we've got a restructured crime intelligence, which will also find the hijacking syndicates, who's hitting the cash vans and the jewelry stores in the malls. So I'm answering your question by saying your impatience and your sense of frustration are justified. And we know they're justified because of those statistics I gave earlier. So I'm not sidestepping it. What I'm saying is that, like with the ARV program, at the end of 2004, Dr. Yanda Nsaluba, who was DG of Health then, had to start putting a whole program in place in order to get ARVs. People said it couldn't be done. They said people can't tell the time, but we've got it, and people are taking their ARVs. So I'm answering you, Pamela, by saying we have to get the systems in place, that systems which I think, on reasonable grounds, my opinion, were deliberately destroyed over 9 years of crime intelligence, of police capacity, of prosecuting capacity. And I think that we're busy getting those right. And then we will see the improvements that we want to see.
So maybe to ask it in another way, what is it that we don't know, for instance, about why the position of judges in the Constitutional Court is not filled? Is it something we don't know, for instance?
No, I don't think so. And I think President Cyril Ramaphosa 2 weeks ago did in fact make the 2 new appointments. He appointed 2 highly experienced Supreme Court of Appeal judges, Judge Azukisa Chikwi and Judge Stephen Majid. And they are now taking office. They're taking office in the court on Tuesday, the 1st of October.
That's not filling up all the positions.
Well, it's my vacancy, which is going to be advertised now, and then there'll be interviews in April. So those are filled, and there was a delay. I don't know what the reasons for the delay were.
Okay, we'll take those calls, as I said, and we will be taking this conversation all the way until 3 o'clock. I am in conversation with Justice Cameron, and there is a lot more. I know that you want to know about his childhood, and we'll get to that. But we wanted to get some of the important things out the way
Some
first.
of the difficult things first.
0891 104 207. We are going to be going straight to Utsile Saku for the news. Your role, Justice, now that you are where you are right now, your voice on inequality, because obviously, this country has a past, and we always assume, white male must have come with privilege, right, which was not the case for you. just how important is it for you to at least have that being something that is offered to those who are where you were a couple of years ago, to say, you know, there is a way out of this poverty. Am I right in saying education was your way out of poverty?
Correct. And education, may I say, Pumila, that it was education because of my whiteness. I kept the privilege of whiteness, even though I grew up very poor in a fractured household and in a children's home. My white skin got me to a whites-only excellent high school in Pretoria, excellent university, Stellenbosch University, whites only, 40 years ago, shamefully, now opening up to everyone. So I still bore the privilege of whiteness, which I still do to this day, and I'm very conscious of that. But so let's take what you're saying. I think they're well-justified criticisms of our national education system, and I think there's a lot that we can do there. Your suggestion that education is a precondition for anything we want to do in this country is absolutely rock solid. I fully agree with that. And I agree that if you give a child the opportunities, that's why it's so exciting to work with young people. Our young kids are thirsting for opportunities. They want to work, they want to learn, they want to get places, and we mustn't betray them. And education, you cannot get places without education.
We are taking those calls on 0891 104 207. Let's go quickly to Uzi Lesaku now. It's 2:30. Let's get the latest headlines from
SAFM.